Welcome to Water Level. Today's update takes us deep into the heart of the Colorado River Basin, where two of America's most important reservoirs, Lake Mead and Lake Powell, continue to shape the water picture for millions of people across the Southwest. The latest readings for October 7, 2025, mark the end of the first week of the new water year, and this is a perfect moment to look closely at how both lakes are performing, how they compare to last year, and what the current data tells us about the path ahead. Let's begin with Lake Powell, the upstream giant that controls how much water eventually reaches Lake Mead. The latest reading shows Lake Powell at an elevation of 3544.19 feet, with a total content representing 27.6% of full pool. That means Powell still sits about 156 feet below its full elevation of 3,700 feet. While that number shows there's still a long recovery ahead, the most important part of this story is stability. Powell is holding steady and managing its releases effectively at the start of water year 2026. Right now, Powell holds an estimated 2.18 trillion gallons of water, which equals more than 27% of its total design capacity. The data shows that total inflows for the water year so far are about 80,000 acre-feet, which is 63% of the early October average. Meanwhile, total releases through Glen Canyon Dam stand at around 110,000 acre-feet, just 1.48% of the required annual release goal of 7.5 million acre-feet. This early pattern, slightly higher outflow than inflow, is typical for October, but it's balanced by stored reserves and slower downstream demand. In the past 12 months, Powell's water level has dropped by 33.46 feet compared to this same date in 2024. While that's a sizable decline, it's important to remember that last year's level was temporarily boosted by higher-than-average inflows from upstream snowmelt. Since then, Powell's releases have supported downstream reservoirs like Lake Mead, helping them maintain stability. So while Powell's chart shows a decline, its role as a stabilizer for the broader river system remains critical. If you look at the water level chart for Lake Powell over the last year, you can see a clear downward curve starting in late fall and continuing through early spring, before flattening out around April and May. A small bump appears in early summer, likely the result of spring runoff and managed inflows, but by late July, the downward slope returns. This pattern shows how the lake absorbs seasonal inflows, provides consistent outflows, and supports the larger river network even while experiencing its own declines. The takeaway here is that Powell remains the key regulator, and its current stability is laying the groundwork for improvement downstream. That brings us to Lake Mead, the lower basin reservoir, and the endpoint for water released from Powell through the Grand Canyon and Hoover Dam system. The latest reading for Lake Mead is 1,058.02 feet, which puts it 161.6 feet below full pool, but almost level with its highest point of the water year, just 0.04 feet below the peak. That detail alone is a strong indicator that the lake has begun a period of stability and possibly a slow, sustained rise heading into the early months of the 2026 water year. Lake Mead's content now stands at 31.97% of full pool, holding around 25.8 million acre-feet of water. Over the past year, Mead's elevation has dropped by 5.84 feet, but that decline has nearly stopped. The last several weeks have shown a consistent upward movement in the chart, a pattern rarely seen in October. This is the good news for Lake Mead watchers. Despite challenges upstream, Mead is gaining water, not losing it. Inflows to Lake Mead so far this water year total 135,376 acre-feet, which is an impressive 128% of the early October average. At the same time, total releases from Hoover Dam have been limited to 60,402 acre-feet, which is less than 1% of the minimum required annual release of 9 million acre-feet. This early pattern, slightly higher outflow than inflow, is exactly what's driving this positive start. If you look at the 12-month graph for Lake Mead, you can see the entire story unfold. Last fall and early winter saw moderate declines, but from December into February, water levels climbed steadily, peaking around 1,068 feet in late February 2025. After that, the lake began its typical seasonal decline through spring and summer, bottoming out near 1,053 feet in early September. But the crucial detail is what's happened since then. The line has curved back upward. It's not a sharp rise, but it's a steady one, and that's a big win for such a massive body of water. This recovery is a result of balanced system management. While Powell's storage is lower, its releases have been calibrated to keep Mead from falling further. At the same time, inflows from the Virgin and Muddy rivers, along with smaller tributaries, have slightly exceeded expectations. Combine that with reduced Hoover Dam outflows, and the result is measurable gain at Mead for the first time in months. To put this in perspective, in just the past few weeks, Mead's surface elevation has increased by several inches. Small on paper, but enormous when you consider that every single foot of elevation represents hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water. Even a gain of half a foot can mean over 100,000 acre-feet added to storage. That's why these recent numbers are so encouraging. Another key metric to highlight is water storage change. During the first week of the new water year, Lake Mead's total storage has fallen by 438,676 acre-feet, but that's a much smaller drop than in previous years. At the same point last October, storage losses were nearly double that. This moderation in decline shows how improved coordination and early inflows are keeping the system stable. It's also worth noting that overall inflows for the basin are 103.7% of last year's rate, which gives both Powell and Mead a stronger starting position for the months ahead. Looking at the basin as a whole, the 34 major reservoirs that make up the Colorado River system are currently at about 68% of capacity. That figure provides important context. It means that while Powell and Mead remain well below full pool, the system feeding them is relatively healthy. The combined storage across the basin acts as a cushion that helps regulate releases, ensuring stability even when individual reservoirs fluctuate. That's part of why Lake Mead's trend has turned upward despite Powell's current lower elevation. Now, if we compare the two lakes side by side, an interesting picture emerges. Lake Powell is down about 33 feet from last year, while Lake Mead is only down about 6. This difference highlights how water management priorities have been balanced between the two, Powell bearing more of the release burden to keep Mead steady. It's a delicate operation, but it's showing success. Even though Powell's level has dropped, that water has gone on to help maintain and slightly improve Mead's position. The inflows to outflows ratios reinforce this. At Lake Powell, outflows slightly exceed inflows right now, while at Lake Mead, the opposite is true. Inflows exceed outflows. This setup effectively transfers water strength downstream and stabilizes the lower basin. It's a coordinated effort that ensures no single reservoir bears the full weight of system demand at once. It also helps maintain hydroelectric generation capacity at Hoover Dam and Glen Canyon Dam, keeping energy output efficient despite the lower water levels. When we look at the recent graphs more closely, the data shows a near-perfect example of how the Colorado River system breathes. Powell contracts slightly, Mead expands slightly, and both hold the line together. This interdependence is what keeps the system from swinging too far in either direction. Right now, Lake Mead's rise is a reflection of that shared stability. One of the most encouraging aspects of this update is that Lake Mead is less than half a foot away from its yearly high. That means even small improvements in inflow or minor adjustments in dam release schedules could push it above its peak, marking the first significant gain of the new water year. Such an early positive shift could build momentum as the months go on. If this upward trend continues into November, it would set a strong tone for the entire 2026 season. It's also important to note that both lakes are entering this water year with measurable advantages. For Powell, even though the level is lower than last year, total system inflows percentages for October are still healthy. For Mead, the combination of reduced releases, stronger inflows, and slower downstream draw has resulted in visible improvement. The data so far paints a cautiously optimistic picture, not of dramatic recovery, but of real, measurable progress. The big picture takeaway is that Lake Mead is holding strong and showing signs of growth, while Powell continues to provide the vital releases that make that growth possible. The system as a whole is operating in balance early in the water year, a delicate but encouraging start that gives everyone watching these numbers a reason to be hopeful. For those tracking both lakes daily, the story is simple. The upper reservoir is stable, the lower reservoir is gaining, and the flow between them remains coordinated and sustainable for now. These are the small victories that build over time, the kind that lead to larger improvements in coming months.